All right, y'all, it is the beginning of the month, and that means it's time for another new batch of Tales from the Crypt episodes. But tonight is going to be an extended edition of this because we are covering 3 episodes tonight, as our theme is Two-Fisted Tales. I'm going to be talking Showdown, King of the Road, and Yellow. Stay tuned. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. Like I mentioned tonight, we are headed back to the crypt here for another batch of Tales from the Crypt episodes. But rather than covering our usual 2, we are going up to 3 tonight because the theme for July is Two-Fisted Tales. This is one of the Tales from the Crypt spinoffs that we got in the early 90s that was originally produced as a TV movie featuring 3 episodes that ultimately were rolled back into Tales from the Crypt. Now, you have likely seen at least one of these episodes here before, but we're going to break down each one individually, and we are also going to talk a little bit more here about Two-Fisted Tales just in general. Of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, hit that follow button no matter where you're watching or listening, folks. Got a lot of great horror content back on the channel and a lot of great stuff coming up that I'm going to talk about at the end of the show. Now, like I mentioned, our theme here is Two-Fisted Tales. You may or may not know that Tales from the Crypt, the TV show, is taking a number of comics that were produced under the EC Comics banner and adapting those for the episodes that we saw across the 7 seasons of this show. Now, some of those did actually come from the comics titled Tales from the Crypt. Two-Fisted Tales. There are a lot of other comics that are covered under the EC Comics banner that the producers took to adapt Tales from the Crypt episodes. And the idea kind of was, after the first few seasons of the show really blowing up and introducing this new horror icon in the Crypt Keeper, well, it kind of made sense to take that same idea and just try to do that again, because some of the episodes at that point, up until like the midway through season 3, weren't necessarily horror geared. And I have to imagine that producers decided, you know what, we can very easily distinguish these episodes from being different from what folks are expecting in Tales from the Crypt. There's going to be a lot less comedy, that's going to be far more serious in tone, and those who are wanting more of an action-heavy approach, this is going to be the show that they need to watch. And that does make sense, because if you think about the landscape of films we are seeing from the early to mid-90s, we are coming out of the action-heavy phase that we were getting from guys like Schwarzenegger and Stallone back in the late 80s. Thus, we get Two-Fisted Tales. Now, what's most interesting about this show is the fact that none of these stories that are featured in Two-Fisted Tales was actually adapted from that comic line at all. Considering the opening, which I'm going to show you here right now, considering that opening and the fact that they're not adapting any actual stories from Two-Fisted Tale, it seems that the idea really was to find those very few gems across, again, all the other EC comics that kind of fit this tone. But not only that, given what we see in a couple of the episodes, we are going to expect a lot more original stories as well, too, because Tales from the Crypt famously does not really have a lot of original stories featured in that, and because it's from the same people that brought you Tales from the Crypt. And if you add in the certain factors that I'm sure they were banking on, anthology stories, having a host to book in the segment that keeps you drawn in for that, and then having the greatest talent in front of and behind the camera, those are 3 really good points to have in your show. But it was very clear that wasn't enough here with Two-Fisted Tales. So we're going to talk more about that as we dive into each episode, because it does actually change the presentation up when you watch the Two-Fisted Tales release versus watching the Tales from the Crypt version instead. And on top of this, I will actually give y'all a link to where you can watch Two-Fisted Tales right now on YouTube to check out for yourself. We're going to start off with the first episode presented here in this presentation, Showdown. Now, on the run from a mysterious posse and leaving a lot of bodies in his wake, Billy is just looking for a place to settle down for a moment and catch his breath. When a Texas Ranger catches up to him, though, and challenges him to a gunfight, Billy will find out that the town he's seeking to find solace in is full of the ghost of his past. and that is Showdown. Now, what stands out about this episode is the behind the scenes talent that we get on this. Again, if you're gonna try to make a spinoff from Tales from the Crypt, and you know that that show is so famous for having the best writers and directors behind the camera, in front of it's no issues at all, then you have to still do that with any spinoff you're doing as well too. And we absolutely get that here with Showdown, as on writing duties, we have Frank Darabont. Yeah, folks, Dream Warriors, Frank Darabont. Fly 2, Frank Darabont. The Blob remake, Frank Darabont. That's right, his best films, I won't hear about it. There are no films that he has done that are better than those ones here. And in directing duties is freaking Richard Donner, guys. Superman, The Goonies. This is one of the best behind the camera pairings that we've gotten over the entire run of Tales from the Crypt. And that is saying a lot because there are some legendary pairings on this show. Now, as for the story itself, again, Billy is on the run from a posse. We don't know if they're otherworldly or not, but we do know that has to mean certain death for Billy if they catch up to him. Now, when Billy gets to this town, and again, he's seeking a little bit of solace, a Texas Ranger played by David Morse catches up to him and is challenged to a gunfight. Billy does emerge victorious and then heads off to the saloon to go and grab himself a drink. And it's only when he gets to this saloon he starts to realize there's something off with the patrons currently attending there. Now, as for the characters, my description of the story probably makes it seem like there are a lot of people in this episode. And to that credit, there are. A lot of folks do show up in this one, but Billy is really the only actual realized character out of anybody that we're seeing here in this case. Neil Giuntoli, who you should recognize as Eddie Caputo from Child's Play. That's right, that Eddie Caputo who drove off when Charles Lee Ray got shot by Mike Norris. He's the one starring here as Billy, and he does a wonderful job here in the role. You know, Billy is working through a lot of different stages of like emotions throughout this episode, whether it's grief, whether it's desperation, whether it's anger, confusion, like all these things here. And Giuntoli effortlessly goes through each one. Billy is for sure responsible for his own predicament, but unlike a lot of the other protagonists that we see in Tales from the Crypt, he's one that you're not necessarily angry with. As for our Crypt Keeper and our Mr. Rush segments in this one. Now, the Crypt Keeper tone keeps things obviously light and humorous here. We see that the Crypt Keeper is playing a gunslinger himself. He's trying to get into a duel, and then at the end of it, he's basically gotten out of the duel and making more cracks about people being killed by buffalo at that point. Again, it gives a comedic tone to the episode, but what's interesting about it is that I don't actually think it is my preferred opening and ending of this episode, not my preferred bookend when you see what's happening over in Two-Fisted Tales. Now, Mr. Rush in Two-Fisted Tales is a bit more interactive with the viewer. Like, yeah, we always get the hello boils and ghouls or hello kitties from like the Crypt Keeper, and there's interaction there. But what you'll see over the course of Two-Fisted Tales is the fact that Mr. Rush is doing intricate stuff with the viewer through the camera that has them involved. And like they'll be doing push-ups or nodding or coming out from hiding somewhere. And I really did enjoy that factor of Two-Fisted Tales, that the viewer was even more involved than they were with the Crypt Keeper.
What are you staring at? Had you never seen a gunslinger before? Took 12 bullets right here. Oh, they hurt, yeah. But I didn't cry. I didn't even whimper. Of course, you would know about that, would you? Because you never took any slugs, did you? No, you'd rather sit in a big easy chair and eat popcorn! You probably ain't even got the guts to hear the story I'm gonna tell you, do you? See, it's about a young gunslinger who is just about to have the showdown of his life. 7, 8, 9. Damn, where'd you go? Oh, there you are. Hiding behind the sofa, huh? Well, come on out of there. I ain't gonna hurt you. I said I ain't gonna hurt you. Come on. Here, see? Come here. I want to show you something. Come here. Damn, I can't believe you fell for that one, stupid.
there isn't any comedic value here to Showdown at all. It's a good episode, but the comedy that you would want from your typical Tales from the Crypt episode is not at all featured here in this one very purposely. And therefore, because of that, Mr. Rush's segment fits much better than the Crypt Keeper does. As for our twist, the twist in this one is when Billy ends up killing the Texas Ranger and goes to the saloon to have a drink, he soon realizes that the other patrons of the saloon are his previous victims, people that he's gunned down in gunfights. And as they're trying to basically make Billy understand something else, Billy realizes that he's actually in present day. What would have been present day at the time, 1991, 1992, basically. And that he is actually now in a tourist attraction for what people are going back to look at his own infamous actions and the gunfights he got in and the people he killed. And this leads us to an even bigger twist that Billy has been dead and just not remembering that after the gunfight with the Texas Ranger, he himself was also gunned down by the other Rangers that were there as well too. Ultimately, the episode ends with Billy's victims recruiting Billy into their posse and them all riding off into the sunset together. It's a haunting tale for sure. But again, with this fantastic team behind the camera, Frank Darabont and Richard Donner, with a wonderful performance from Neil Giuntoli, who plays Billy here in this case, and the fact that it does keep the haunting elements of what we expect from a Tales from the Crypt story, even though we're not actually getting any comedic efforts out of it here, leaves it at a ranking of 11 out of 15. Our second episode we are talking tonight is King of the Road. Billy is one of the best street racers out there, but he's also one of the most dangerous, with many of his opponents ending up dead. Seeking to be the best, he tracks down Sheriff Joe Garrett, who was once known behind the wheel as Iceman. Now, first of all, the standout point from this episode is that this is director Tom Holland's second episode of his Tales from the Crypt run. Now, Tom Holland, again, this is the guy behind such horror classics including Fright Night and the original Child's Play film. This is a great pedigree to have him on to the show. We have already talked about his previous episode, Four-Sided Triangle, which you can go back on my channel and check out the looks for that now. Also, King of the Road has the distinction of being the only straight-up original episode of the entire Tales from the Crypt run. Even though Showdown was an original story, it took its name from an already existing Two-Fisted Tales story. It did not adapt that story, but it did take the name from it. King of the Road, both in story and name, is not taken from any existing EC comic. This is an original, completely original work here for the show. Now back to the story. Again, we see the episode start off with Billy winning a race to where his rival is killed after he flips his car, and Billy seeking again to just get that ultimate thrill and really define himself as the king, tracks down one of the greatest street racers that he's ever heard of, the Iceman, who now is known as Sheriff Joe Garrett, who's raising his daughter by himself and has long since retired from the life of racing. We find out that Garrett ultimately got out of the sport after a rival of his was accidentally killed during a race. Billy, unwilling to step back from getting what he wants, decides to escalate attacks against Garrett to goad him into one final race to truly determine who is the king of the road, and Garrett has no choice but to agree after Billy kidnaps his daughter and threatens to kill her unless he races. Now, in regards to the characters, it is very interesting that Yellow, out of these three episodes here, is the only one that actually comes from an existing comic story, but yet and still Billy and Iceman feel the most like comic book characters across this Two-Fisted Tale presentation. They are very much archetypes of these old 80s action movies and 70s action movies of the past centered around a big race. And you can really tell that because there's not that much that's going into the characterization of these two. And that's nothing against the actors here, Raymond J. Barry, who plays Iceman or Sheriff Garrett, or Brad Pitt, who plays Billy, because both actors obviously put in fantastic performances here with it, but it's very much like they're playing caricatures. And in this story, that's not a bad thing at all. As for the Crypt Keeper and Mr. Rush segments, Actually, I would say that both hosts keep a comedic feel to this tale this time around here. You know, Mr. Rush starts off giving us a bit of an homage to Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, having the metal plate in his head a la Chop Top and complaining about that pain.
Ah! Damn metal plate! I keep hearing the tires screeching. The engine's revving hard. The explosion. I took 1,300 stitches. All of them above the neck. Yeah, that hurt. But I didn't cry. I didn't even whimper. Like you're probably gonna do while you're watching this next story. It's about an old speed demon hell driver who's gotta prove that he ain't over the hill. Like you. Hey, look what I just found. Yeah, it's a pair of your wimpy old underwear. And you know what? They kind of remind me of the road at the end of that story. Because they're both covered with skid marks!
The Crypt Keeper instead is practicing doing like Shakespeare. So the Crypt Keeper we see is doing A Streetcar Named Desire at the beginning, and then is doing Hamlet at the end of the episode. Though it's hilarious to me though that Hamlet, the book he's reading, seems normal, but then he names drops Midsummer Night's Scream and Julius Caesar, other Shakespeare works. So those apparently have funny, scary names, but not Hamlet, because Hamlet is scary enough. I found that so funny and interesting. And also the fact that the Crypt Keeper segments here definitely have a little bit more color to them. You know, in Showdown, and as we're going to talk a little bit about Yellow as well too, the segments that we see are very much still that red, brown, and gold color, which makes it look dark and drab and spooky in the crypt for sure. But it's hard not to like miss the character that the crypt itself ends up being once it starts getting better lighting and more color in it. And at least the opening Crypt Keeper segment in this one adds that in for sure. So I think the segments are neck and neck with Mr. Rush and the Crypt Keeper here in this case. There's not one I prefer over the other there, but it is just interesting to see that they're still played completely different and yet still pull out the comedy angle. This takes us to the twist of King of the Road. Now again, Billy pressures Iceman into a race after kidnapping his daughter and threatening to kill her unless he agrees to it. They get into the race, and Billy does ultimately end up winning, but it turns out that Iceman has set up a bit of a trap, and while Billy wins the race, he ultimately ends up crashing into a bulldozer, which mangles him and his car, and in one last act of defiance, ends up setting off the gasoline leaking from his car, just as Iceman is able to get away and look on at the burning wreckage with his daughter. For a twist there, it is one of the weaker ones of Tales from the Crypt. I don't think that's a bad thing though, because ultimately it's like, well, what are you expecting to happen? Like the cops to show up? This is not that kind of show there. Somebody had to end up dead. Somebody had to end up with something bad happening to them. Somebody had to end up getting their comeuppance. And it makes sense that that's clearly going to be Billy in this case. And the way that he goes out is pretty damn definitive as well too. So when I say weaker, I just mean that there are bigger twists out there that really send you for a ride for not expecting what was coming up here next. And I think a lot of people could probably expect that Billy was going to end up losing this last race here. Barry and Pitt for sure elevate the material here. And like I said, King of the Road does feel like an episode of Crypt that you could put on late night getting home from the bar and it would hit just the right spot there for you as well too. But it still didn't engage me as a lot of other episodes I've covered so far. So I currently have King of the Road ranked at 11 out of 15, folks. And our final episode tonight is Yellow. If you have heard of this episode before, that is with good reason, as Yellow is considered to be one of the best, if not the best, Tales from the Crypt episode of all time. Now, does it fit that for me? You're going to have to stick around to find that out. Lieutenant Martin Calthrop is reluctantly serving in World War I and trying to find any way he can to escape the horrors of war. Problem is, his commanding officer, who just so happens to be his father, wants him to prove his mettle and show that he's not yellow. Yo, the standout point for this one, behind the camera in the director's chair, you have Robert Zemeckis. We are talking Back to the Future Robert Zemeckis in the director's chair. And in front of the camera, you have screen legend Kirk Douglas Kirk Douglas playing a major role here. You have legendary genre actors Lance Henriksen and Dan Aykroyd showing up in this as well too. And then on top of that, Yellow is given the longest runtime of the entire series, going over 30 minutes, the only time that that has happened outside of the Tales from the Crypt films. So there's obviously a lot of confidence that was put into this episode when it went into production, and with very, very good reason here. Now, for the story breakdown, and it's a doozy, the episode starts with Lieutenant Calthrop ordering a retreat in a crucial battle needed to aid the Allies. Being labeled yellow by his subordinates and requesting a transfer to a regiment not in battle, his father and commanding officer assigns him to one last mission to prove his worth. Unfortunately, Martin, terrified for his life, jeopardizes the mission and flees back to base camp, where his actions are revealed and he's ultimately sentenced to death by his very own father. Now, going right into the characters, Martin may actually be the best protagonist across all of Tales from the Crypt. I don't think there's anybody else in the entire run who comes close to having us sympathize about the things that Martin is going through, and then also equally hate him for the stuff that he's not doing. That we look at the fact that Martin is so scared about engaging in battle and putting his life on the line, and we see that as just being unacceptable to us. But then we have to sit and think about that fact. If we were in the same position, would we have the guts to do what Martin himself is not doing? Man, like, I just don't know where to go with this guy. And that is the true sign of great writing here, and showing that this is a character that we very, very much love to watch. Now, as for the Crypt Keeper, Mr. Rush segments here, this is where there actually is a very significant difference in the tone of what the Crypt Keeper does to what Mr. Rush does, and it does actually have an effect on the episode itself. Now, the Crypt Keeper, of course, keeps things light and humorous. He's playing like he's in the army itself and ordering a firing squad, which obviously plays into what's presented onto the story. And then at the end of the tale, he makes a very, very morbid joke about getting all of his shots, which is... That's a banger of a joke, honestly. That's a really good one there that they work in on that one. But the thing is that the Crypt Keeper segments very much push a more of a black comedy and slight horror elements here into the episode itself that you would likely not think about any other way. And I say that because if you look at Mr. Rush's segment, which kind of plays out the same way.
Tin up! I said, tin up! Is there something wrong with your hearing, soldier? You got your head so far up somebody's asshole, you got shit in your ears. Is that your problem, maggot? Because you're in my army now, and I say you drop and give me 50 slow ones. Right now, you hamster fucking limp dick! I'll rip your head off and shit down your neck! You think you're tough, don't you? Hell, you ain't tough. You're a little Nancy boy, that's what you are. Tough is throwing yourself on a live hand grenade just for the fun of it. Like I did. That thing blowed me into 100 tiny thousand pieces. Well, I was so fucked up after that, they took me to the hospital in buckets. Took them 2 weeks to scrape my innards off the wall so they could dump them back inside of me. You think that felt good? That fucking hurt. I didn't cry. I didn't even whimper. You are supposed to be doing push-ups, you shitheel. Now you can drop and give me 100 of them. Do you hear me? Now, while you're doing that, I'm gonna tell you a story about another soldier who's a pussy just like you. Now, you think you got the guts to hear this? Well, do you, sperm bank? Well, I'll be damned, you're still there. Well, I'm impressed, maggot. You actually had the balls to stay the course. You know, maybe you're not such a fucking mama's boy after all. On the other hand, maybe I'm wrong. Here, you're probably gonna need this to clean up that puddle you're sitting in. Yeah, you better run, you limp-wristed dick smoker. I get this grenade unpinned, I'm gonna shove it where the sun don't shine. Get back here! Son of a bitch. Get over here! Son of a bitch, I get my hands on you, I'm gonna shove.
It's hard not to argue that the tone of Mr. Rush's segment keeps things far more serious. And given the ending with the twist, which we're going to talk about here in just a second, I will say that in order to protect the integrity of like one of the comedic elements, one of the only comedic elements in this entire episode, the Crypt Keeper segment works better. But overall, for the story that's being told here, I think that Mr. Rush's segments are actually the better one to go with, just because of the fact that it keeps that tone of this being morbid and gloomy. They are in war right now. It seems like adding comedy into it, like the Crypt Keeper segment does, would actually tune that down a bit. And it really does have that effect, y'all. Again, watch the Two Fisted Tales presentation on YouTube. And then if you have the ability, go and watch this episode if you can find a rip or a DVD or whatever somewhere, and just compare the two and tell me I'm not wrong that Mr. Rush's segments fit better here for this. And this, of course, brings us to the twist. Now, again, Martin's father sentences him to death by firing squad, but hours before the execution, his father shows up to basically tell him, of course, I'm not going to let you get killed. I'm not going to let you get harmed. We're going to fill all the rifles with blanks, and then after you're shot, you have to play dead, and then the unit's going to move out, and you are on your own at that point. And of course, the only request here is that Martin shows that he's not yellow, that he can go through with this execution with a brave face on and show that he is a man. Unfortunately for Martin, as he only realizes seconds before the execution is carried out when his father turns his head, it turns out that he is actually being sentenced to death here, and that his father was ultimately, again, just looking to making man out of him. Martin is literally shot out of his shoes, and that is the comedic moment I'm talking about. We see him get shot, and we see his shoes still remaining there on the platform. Martin is shot out of his shoes, and it's once and for all proven that he is not yellow. So, again, with that bit of comedy there at the end, the Crypt Keeper segment works well to make that more effective, but I do believe it plays as more ironic if you're watching it with the Mr. Rush segments here. This is an all-timer of an episode, again, in front of and behind the camera. It's one of the strongest stories that we get across the entire run of this. It's also interesting because there's an episode, I want to say in season 7, that I don't know if it's set during World War I or not, but it also has to do with like a German infiltrator in the war that kind of seems like it's almost like a sequel to this, or it's set at least at the same time, which we'll get to at some point there. But this is such a fascinating episode to watch, and it's so cool that this is one that so many people love, even though it doesn't have a lot of the typical stuff you would expect in a Tales from the Crypt episode. Again, the horror is there, but it's the horror of war, ultimately, that we're really focused on here with that. When it comes to the ranking of this one, I have yellow ranked as 4 out of 15. It is not my favorite episode of the show, y'all. Again, I'd imagine it's going to stay fairly high by the time I'm ultimately done going through every episode of Tales from the Crypt. But I just can't I can't get away from the fact that I love the horror stuff more than anything. And so there's just going to be a few more episodes that stand out because they do just as good of a job, in my opinion, in front of and behind the camera, but they also put those horror elements in there for sure. So that is going to do it for us here tonight. Another Tales from the Crypt batch of episodes down here for you. I'm going to be back at the beginning of August with a new double feature for you here. If you tuned into this, let me know what you think that theme should be, or if there's just an episode you want me to look at, because I'll find something to theme it up there with. But of course, make sure you're getting subscribed to my channels as well too, which you can do through linktr.ee/tscarymovie. If you get subscribed, that's going to give you access to the YouTube page for the video versions of the show, your favorite podcasting platforms for the audio-only versions of the show, my Letterboxd page for written reviews and movie rankings throughout the year, my TikTok page for short horror content including movie news, movie premieres, and movie reviews, my Twitch page for horror gaming, and my Fangoria shop page for a 20% discount off anything in the Fangoria shop. Take advantage of that, y'all. Hit that subscribe button, hit that follow button no matter where you're watching or listening. Again, we got a lot of great content coming up for y'all here. We are going to be talking I Know What You Did Last Summer. We're going to talk weapons, Dexter Resurrection. I got a lot of great stuff that I do not want y'all to miss out on all. So you got to hit that subscribe button, stay on top of it. I might be convinced to do a review here for Jurassic World Rebirth, because if I'm going to do Megan 2.0, I probably have to do Jurassic World as well too. So we'll see if we get that in there, y'all. But let me know what you want me to check out in the comment section, and stay tuned, y'all. My name is T. We've been talking scary movies. Stay scared.